Hey y'all, it's Saint Pam again. Today I'm going to talk about the names of the Warframes in, well, Warframe. A lot of you probably already know, but I found them to be interesting. Some of the names are more obvious than others, but I think they all fit pretty well. Since there are so many frames, I'll be splitting this into two videos. First, I'll go over the female frames. This will be done in alphabetical order. So let's get started. Oh, and all of the frames pictured are going to be my own, and yes, I do have a thing for black. A banshee, an Irish legend, is a female spirit that wails when there will be a death in a house. This fits the frame well, as all of her abilities have something to do with sound. She uses sound not only as a weapon to injure her enemies, but also as a way to locate and disable them. Not only that, but she can silence her gunfire, making her reasonably stealthy. She can't disappear or anything, but at least she can be really quiet, so if you're careful, you can kind of stealth on her. In the paraphrased words of Mr. Torg, this next frame's thing is she really likes fire. With abilities that not only sets her enemies ablaze, but one that makes her fire burn hotter, is there any wonder her name is Ember? It only seems appropriate that a frame that sets the world on fire would be named after the glowing coals of a dying fire. One of the more interesting frames is named after a celestial event that happens only a couple times a year. During an equinox, the sun crosses the celestial equator, which causes night and day to be the same length. This frame is split into two forms, day and night, a feminine and a masculine. When using her night form, her abilities are more peaceful and supportive. She puts enemies to sleep, reduces damage taken, and heals her allies. In her day form, her aggression awakens. While in this form, she increases damage to enemies, as well as the strength of her allies' abilities. She also has an AoE that bleeds and slashes nearby enemies. In either form, her abilities are as different as, well, as day and night. A warrior themed around glass seems like a strange concept, but Gara makes it work. There is some confusion around her name since Gara translates to husk or is simply the English word glass in katakana kanji, which I probably just butchered. Maybe inspiration was even taken from Naruto. It could be a combination of all these things. Regardless of the reason for her name, this is an interesting frame. She attacks enemies with shards of glass, forces them to attack reflections of themselves, and creates a wall of molten glass that crystallizes her foes. If there had not been a stealthy, archery-based frame, I would have been surprised. So here we find Avara, a Norwegian name that means yew tree and archery. Now, her appearance is based on tree frogs, so I feel like with her being archery and her name being based, or her appearance being based on a specific type of frog as it is, I think that she touches on both of those meanings pretty well. 3 of her abilities have to do directly with bows. She can shoot a variety of arrows that give her the option of cloaking an area that she and her squad mates can hide in. If needed, she can shoot an arrow that will place a zip line to dash across wherever she wants it to go. When her enemies get too close for comfort, she can shoot a noisy arrow to distract them. I'm going to call that a noisy cricket. Or one to put them to sleep. For a more precise hit, Ivara is able to guide an arrow where she wants it to go. Her powers also give her the option to summon a powerful, hard-hitting bow. On top of all of that, she can turn invisible and essentially pick the pockets of nearby enemies. She'll get close to them, and then if they have something on them, she can pull it off. A frame with the name Mag that perhaps obviously uses magnetic themed abilities is up next. Her name seems to simply be the shortened version of the word magnet. She can, like her namesake, pull enemies to her and freeze them in place. The magnetic pulses she emits lowers her foes' shields. Mag can also magnetize her enemies' bones, which causes them to essentially implode. Mesa is a gunslinging warframe. Now, her name is Spanish for the word table. In America, this word is used to describe flat-top land formations. Other than sounding kind of Western, it has little to, or rather nothing to do with her abilities. She is able to take damage inflicted on her by firearms and shoot it back at her enemies. Her allies can receive an increase to their damage and have their foes' guns jammed. Mesa can grant herself a shield that will cause bullets to bounce back at her attackers. And with intense focus, her regulator pistols find her nearby targets with deadly precision. A mirage is an optical illusion, and there is no better name for this frame. One of her abilities allows her to create multiple holographic versions of herself that mimic her movements and increase her damage. A sleight of hand produces a jewel that her enemies cannot resist. These gems blind them, or they can even explode. When in the light, she can do more damage or become harder to find in the shadows. She can also create a prism of light or energy that cuts into her enemies with dozens of, or with a lot of lasers, or it even blinds them with the light that it produces. The name Nova conjures images of expanding stars, or in the event of a supernova, one that explodes. The explosion of a star creates antimatter, and this is what our next frame uses to defeat her foes. Particles of antimatter orbit her and seek out nearby enemies. She also creates a large ball of this material that she throws at her foes, and it will explode on contact. Wormholes allow her to cross a large distance in an instant, and antimatter can also be used to slow enemies. When they die, it'll cause them to explode. In Greek mythology, Nyx is the goddess of night, dreams, sleep, darkness, and death. She was also the daughter of Chaos, which is appropriate since this warframe uses chaos to her advantage. She creates mass hysteria, which causes her foes to attack anyone and everyone. She can also take damage done to her and cause it to explode around her. Her abilities allow her to control the minds of her enemies and make them fight for her. Her mind is even powerful enough to launch force bolts, and with focus, she can guide them to her desired target. Octavia itself just means born eighth. The word, I believe, is derived from octave, which is a series of 8 notes. Being as this is a musical frame, which strikes me as a space bard, the name works. She uses a mantichord that allows the composition of her own unique songs. Her music distracts enemies and reflects their damage back at them. It inspires her allies to perform better and allows them to do things like turn invisible, run faster, shoot better, and hit harder. She also has an amp that, when used, makes her and her allies' abilities stronger. Sarin is derived from the name of a toxic chemical that is tasteless, colorless, and odorless. Oh my gosh, does that make her iocane powder? Regardless, this is a clever name for a toxic frame. This girl can attach toxic spores to her enemies. Molting allows her to shed her skin and leave a decoy behind. Her melee weapons can be used to burst and spread spores. She can pollute the very air around her to corrode her foe's flesh. Try saying that 3 times fast. This will actually hurt them even more if they are already contaminated. If you are a fan of A Midsummer Night's Dream, then you will recognize the name of this Shakespeare-inspired frame, Titania. She is the queen of the fairies, and she certainly looks the part. It helps that her abilities have a magical feel to them. She can cause her enemies to float helplessly into the air and protect her allies from their abilities. The souls of her foes can be pulled from them and absorbed by her to her benefit. Her razor flies swarm and confuse enemies into attacking one another. She also has the ability to shrink down, fly around, and attack her foes with very powerful weapons. Being so small also makes her harder to hit. If you are looking for a healer, then Trinity is a safe bet. Her name means triad and could be inspired by Christianity or the idea that holy men are healers. Her abilities seem to fit this idea well. Not only can she heal her allies, but she can also restore their shields. Another ability allows her to drain energy from her enemies and grant some of it to her allies. A link can be created between her and a foe, which directs damage that's done to her to them instead. She is also able to protect the team by granting them a little immunity. In Norse mythology, a Valkyrie is one of Odin's handmaidens, and she chooses who will die in battle. The word itself means chooser of slain. This is a perfect description for Valkyr, a frame that easily destroys all who oppose her. A ripcord allows her to pull specific enemies to her, or enables her to pull herself into the fray. Her war cry inspires allies and intimidates foes. Her shields paralyze enemies, and when a berserk rage overcomes her, her claws come into play against them. Zephyr is another Greek-inspired name, with the god of the west wind being the original owner of it. It now just means a gentle blowing wind, or is used specifically for west wind, but it originated from the Greek gods. And she certainly knows how to use the wind to her advantage. By using her namesake, she can hover in the air or fly to a specific location. Air can be pushed suddenly at her enemies to knock them back. She can create turbulence around herself to prevent projectiles from reaching her. Perhaps most impressively, her control over the wind allows her to create a group of tornadoes that will pick up and kill her foes. Well, that is all I have for now. This list includes all of the female frames that are currently in game. I will create another video for the male frames. My husband has all of those, so the screenshots I take are going to include his. After the next few, possibly the next 4 or 5, I'll create a new video talking about their names and how they line up with the abilities. If you like what I do and would like to support this channel, then please check out my Patreon. The link is below, and any help would be greatly appreciated. I would also love it if you would like and subscribe. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you all have a great night. Bye!